Hi guys, this is Riza with Full Awakening, here to bring you your daily 11:11 meditation and teaching. Today I'm going to be bringing you your first Saturday meditation and teaching of this new series. So I have something I want to talk about today. The lesson is called Respirating Our Shame and Our Suffering. And some of this can be personal, most of it can be planetary and collective. And I've just been feeling some really deep heaviness in the collective. I watched some news last night, which I don't often spend a lot of time watching news on the television, but we have we turned on the TV or turned off the TV for something. Anyway, we came upon the news last night and live coverage of the riots and protests, I should say, that were happening in Atlanta, Georgia, and in some other places. And it was very interesting. We felt compelled to continue watching. And my husband and I got into a little bit of I won't say an argument, but there was definitely tension and some very old historical sort of disconnection energy that came up between us, some tension and disconnection energy. And it's around this idea of protest and around this idea of public action, because both of us really admire and look up to Martin Luther King Jr. and Gandhi. These are two people in nonviolent protest, nonviolent action that have inspired both of us. And one of the things that brought us together really 10 years ago was our common allegiance and veneration is the word that comes up, but looking up to these people and looking up to what they did and the bravery and the courage that it takes for nonviolent action. And we often, when we see these protests happening, we get kind of elicited. And one of the things for me is I feel proud of the people who are out there doing that. And I also feel absolutely no desire to be doing that myself, which brings up a little bit of shame. And Tim gets a lot of shame about us not being out there doing that, not being out there protesting and in the streets and publicly expressing our discontent with what's happening in this country, in this world. And we have a little battle with that energetically. It's a hard thing to talk about. And so I think that this is something that, every time I'm struggling, I always think, I'm having a very human experience right now. I'm going to take this immediately outside of this illusionary bubble that I am isolated and alone in this experience, and I am going to open it up to the truth that there are probably many people all over the country and the world right now feeling exactly the way I feel. So what does that look like? There are probably a lot of people, especially Americans, sitting around the world watching their televisions or listening on the radio and hearing that there's these protests and riots to the recent deaths and the ongoing pattern of deaths and inequity of African American males, especially in this country, and that many of us are not on the streets marching and protesting. Many of us who do have the values that it's wrong and that it's deep, deep trauma in this country that needs healing and needs addressing and needs justice and needs equity. Those of us who have those beliefs, which many of us do, aren't out there protesting and in the streets. And is that okay? And should we feel ashamed? And what is shame? And what's the purpose of it? So along those lines, I opened up Pema Chodron's Pocket Pema this morning, and lo and behold, I landed on the page called Positive Shame. And I thought, well, that's how perfect is that? Because our disconnection last night that Tim and I couldn't figure our way out of necessarily. We talked about it a little bit, but it was late and we couldn't really work our way out. And I think for me, as advice to all of you who are in primary partnerships or even close friendships where you have these patterns of disconnection that happen at times or conflict that happens at times, one thing that I've learned is it's so important just to drop back in on yourself, to go into a state of curiosity about what you're really feeling, why you're feeling it, and how you might support yourself in those feelings and feel compassion for yourself when you're having those feelings. Because one of the things that used to be, I love this, Aileen Penn just wrote, I read the saying, be the change you want to see in the world by Gandhi yesterday. That is classic, right? That is a classic and really important idea and quote, and absolutely. And Gandhi lived that. Gandhi lived that in so many brave ways. But the conflict we have sometimes with each other And I think that this is a great time to bring it up because obviously we experience this in our homes with the people that are closest to us, that we feel the safest with, but we also are seeing it on a national and global scale. Often we think it's the other person's job to resolve the conflict inside of us, but really it's our job to know what the conflict inside of us is really about. Because even when we feel like it's about the other person, there's a huge amount of it that's just our material, and we need to be able to see the wounds that are underneath the triggers, right? When something happens and you have a big emotional response, it's hitting on a live scab, it's hitting the surface of a deep, deep wound inside of us. And so that's an opportunity to say, wow, I had a really big reaction to that. Like, what is that about? And to get really curious and kind of peel open that scab a little bit and look inside. Because if something happened to you that had a big reaction, it's yours. There's a tenderness there that is yours and is coming from your history, either your personal history, your cultural history, your inherited history, your soul's incarnated history. It's coming from you and it's asking to be seen. So get familiar with that, because someone could say something or do something in your midst that would really hurt somebody else, and for you, you have no reaction to it, and then it's not yours. There's no scab, there's no deep wound, there's no healing that's asking to be addressed. So I would say that first and foremost, because my partner and I have come so far from having a very aggressive, conflictual relationship to having a very harmonious and supportive relationship. But that is one of the tools that we have both harnessed, is to recognize in ourselves when we're feeling that conflict energy rising and to be really aware of what it is. Because you have your lizard brain, right? That's your reactionary, emotional, instinctual brain. And you have your frontal lobe, or your cognitive centers. And you need to be able to use both of them. You need your thinking brain and you need your emotional brain, or your heart. You need to be able to know what is happening in both those places to come to a balanced perspective in between. So we can look at the brain, or we could look at it in the brain and the heart. I tend to think of the heart as a little bit more of that deep knowing and less of that reactionary lizard brain stuff. But the point is that you have to have your emotions and you have to have your cognitive centers functioning before you can make intelligent steps forward. So if you're feeling that high trigger, if you're feeling that adrenaline rush, you're not in the place where you can really make solid decisions, reasonable decisions. And I think that's what happened to a lot of these, riots and a lot of these protests, these peaceful protests that became riots in a lot of these cities, is people are suffering. They are hurting, and there's deep, deep wounds that are personal, generational, cultural, and people feel disempowered and people feel scared, and they can go out with the best intentions of making a statement and standing for what they believe, but when those wounds are so much at the surface and then they get pushed on by the experience in the crowd, right? And as we know, anxiety is not a personal experience, it's a group activity. So humans are hardwired. If one person in a group of 1,000 becomes super anxious and scared, that anxiety spreads, right? Like wildfire, because we're primed like prey animals to be hyper diligent and to notice when something is awry. So that anxiety energy, it spreads, but so does the calm, grounded energy of balance, right? So if you can be between the emotions and the cognitive part of you, if you can be in that state of balance, if you can be super grounded and calm, that can also spread in a crowd and can really ground a crowd. So I'm going to read you this reading from Pema Chodron called Positive Shame, and we'll talk about it for a moment. This is number 83 in the Pocket Pema. Shame is a loaded word for Westerners. Like most things, it can be seen in a positive or a negative light. Negative shame is accompanied by guilt and self-denigration. It is pointless and doesn't even help us slightly. Positive shame, on the other hand, is recognizing when we're harming ourselves or anyone else and feeling sorry for having done so. It allows us to grow wiser from our mistakes. Eventually it dawns on us, that we can regret causing harm without becoming weighed down by negative shame. Just seeing the hurt and the heartbreak clearly motivates us to move on. By acknowledging what we did cleanly and compassionately, we can go forward. So I think this is a really good teaching. You know, right now, the main thing coming to the forefront in our country, in the US, is race inequity and racism, right? And the foundation of this country that was built upon the backs of Black and brown people and their efforts and their harm of them. And it is still existing in this country today, and white privilege is real, and we are living it. And one of the things that stops that conversation from moving forward is that feeling of confusion about how we hold shame energy, right? Shame energy is really burning hot and heavy and self-harming, can be very self-harming. And either we're very familiar with taking on more responsibility and feeling that shame and holding that shame and burning ourselves up with that shame, or we are very familiar with pushing that shame away and making it not our problem, not our responsibility, right? And again, like anything else, any other spectrum, we've got to find that point in the middle. We've got to move from this idea of binary where there's a black or white option, and we've got to stretch that out. So I always say bring that binary down to the heart and then stretch it out, stretch it out, stretch it out. This is the job of the seeker, of the person that is spiritually evolving consciously and willingly. You're stretching out that spectrum, and then you're trying to find that dynamic zone in the center. So what Pam is talking about here is there is a dynamic zone even within the field of shame. That there can be shame that just brings us down, that burning hot, self-denigrating, I'm the worst person in the world, I don't deserve to live sort of shame that is not productive. And there's the other side of that, which is taking absolutely no responsibility, feeling shameless, without any shame, without any sadness or regret, or what Marshall Rosenberg in Nonviolent Communication calls, I mourning, he says. I mourn the loss of ... I mourn your experience. I mourn the way that I was involved in causing you harm, right? So there's this area in the center where we can take just the right amount of responsibility. And most importantly, I think what she points out is see clearly, right? We can see clearly the harm that is happening to ourselves or to others, and we can feel compassion for it. And we can see the place that we play, the part that we play in perpetuating that harm. And we can self-correct. We can move in a new direction. And that's what we need to do as a people, as a country, as light-skinned people, as people of privilege, and as a world. We need to be able to self-correct, and we can't self-correct in our relationships or in our societies or communities until we can see really clearly what's happening. The last thing I'm going to say before we go into our practice, we're going to do a Tonglen practice today, which is giving and receiving and transmuting suffering, which I think is very needed right now for me personally, but I think also for us on a larger scale. The last thing I'm going to say is, one of my long-term mantras of growth has been, please, please, please help me to see clearly. I just want to see clearly myself and others so that I can understand, accept, and love myself and others. See clearly so you can understand, accept, and love yourself and others. I think that if we could do that, incredible, incredible healing could happen in this country and this world. And there's so many wounds, age-old, ancient, 1,000-year wounds that are coming to the surface right now, and we have the capacity to heal them. I truly believe, Spirit has said this to me many times, and last night as I was going to bed, I kept questioning it. Is it true? Is it true what you said? That the potential, our capacity to heal is always greater than the wound. Our capacity to heal is always greater than the wound. And the intention of the wound is to be healed. So as we're living through our own wounds in our cultures and our societies and our crumbling systems, let us hold this as a truth that the capacity to heal is always greater than that wound. And it is in fact the wound's intention to be healed. All right, thank you guys. Let's do a little meditation. So this meditation is called Tonglen practice. It's giving and receiving is the translation from Sanskrit. It's a Tibetan Buddhist practice, so far as I know. It may be other Buddhist practices also incorporate it. But the idea is that you breathe in suffering and you transmute it in the fire of your heart into the exact kind of relief needed to heal that suffering. And then you exhale that relief onto yourself or others. So the way that I was taught by my teacher, Frank Kopetiers, was to start with myself, move on to a circle of known people, people that I know, and then move on to a larger circle, perhaps an area of the world or, a certain population, basically. So I really like that. We're going to go out and then we're going to come back in. So when I give you the instruction to do the second level out, you're going to draw a circle in your mind and place all the people that you know that are suffering right now. You can even make an open call to all the people in my circle who are suffering. Go ahead and step in the circle, and you might visually or energetically observe them walking into that circle. And then the last ring out will be a certain population or location of people in the world. You can do this simply as an in-breath, transmute, out-breath, relief. I like to do it as a 4-part breath. This is my own way and my own creation, so feel free to do it the way that makes sense to you. But I like to breathe in through my nose, the suffering, see it as a specific color, breathe it down into my heart, pause there, watch it being transmuted, breathe it back up through my nose, and then breathe it out and see that color having changed. So often, it'll be like a dark, murky, sort of muddy color coming in and a brighter or lighter color coming out. Whatever makes sense to you, right? Whatever your visions bring you. Okay, let's try it. Okay, start out just with your normal breath. Just deepen it a bit. Bring that breath into your heart and wake your heart up. Good morning, breath. Good morning, heart. Or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Come into connection with your body, with that heart flame. Notice the colors in your heart flame and let your heart flame know that we're going to do some Tonglen, some receiving and giving, giving and receiving. So let's start out with yourself. Ask your body, is there a place in my body that is holding the energy of suffering? And allow that part of your body to light up. Allow yourself to see the suffering as a color, as an energy, as a movement. You may or may not know what this suffering is about. It may be physical, emotional, psychological. If it's important for you to know what it's about, you can let your body tell you. Otherwise, we're just simply going to do this breath. So imagine the color and the location. And you're going to go ahead and breathe it in. Exhaling it down to the heart. Allowing it to be transmuted into the perfect kind of healing for this specific kind of pain. And breathe it back up. And breathe out that relief onto the area of your body. 2 more times. One last time. Okay, and now imagining a circle in front of you, a golden circle, inviting in all the people that you know that may be feeling a sense of suffering right now. All the people who are afraid or anxious or in pain. All the people who are struggling with conflict energy inside or around them. Inviting them all into this circle. And we're going to do that breath for them. So lifting up that energy of suffering from this circle, seeing it as a specific color and breathing it down into your heart. Letting your heart transmute it. Breathing it out onto the circle. Two more times. One last time. Okay, relax. And now we're going to locate a place on the earth or a specific population of people that are suffering, and we're going to do this breath for them. Okay, and deep breath in, lift that suffering up, seeing it as a specific color. Breathe it down. Let it be transmuted and returned. Again, breathe it up. And breathe it out. One last time. And one final time, we're going to come all the way back to yourself. So just addressing your own body in any place of suffering, any debris that's traveling around you that needs to be gathered up. We're going to breathe that in. And send it back out onto ourselves as healing. One more time. Let's just do this one more time, breathing any last dregs of suffering. And exhaling it onto yourself. All right, and then taking that energy of healing, whenever that energy of transmutation, taking the quality of that and rubbing it between your hands and creating a little orb of this energy of relief and peace, acceptance, and love, relief from suffering. And let's grow that a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger. Okay, now let's place the earth inside, acknowledging the suffering of all beings on earth, suffering of all of our human brethren, sisters and brothers and siblings of the earth and human tribe. And we're going to press this in. We can include our animals and our plants and all the other beings, all the other sentient beings on earth that may experience suffering at this moment. May they all feel relief from that suffering. Squeeze it into the earth, all the way down to the center, the heart of this planet, the dreamer of this planet, giving gratitude, and then pulling that intention into your heart. You're welcome to write in the comments at any point what your color was for that relief, that energy of love that you gave back to yourself or others. Mine changed a little bit from person to person, but it seemed to retain a sort of milky white quality, sort of cloudy like mist. I'd love to hear what yours is. All right, guys, thank you so much. I hope this helps you a little bit in your day, and I recommend practicing Tonglen whenever you're feeling overwhelmed by the suffering that you feel or you see in yourself or others. It is a powerful, powerful tool. You know, this is one thing that came in this morning, that holding the hands of the collective in your hands and saying, at very least, we can do this. We can breathe together. Let's breathe together. If we can breathe, let's breathe for our mutual suffering and our mutual relief. All right, guys, sending you lots of love today and every day, and I'll see you on Monday. Okay, bye.